Today, Jon Miles turns 80 years old. This video is a tribute to his life. We are sharing it with you who have been by his side fighting for justice. After my mom's first marriage ended, she met my stepdad in the late 1970s. I assume she was attracted to his work with the Farm Workers Union and his no-nonsense, adventurous demeanor. This sense of adventure began early in his life.
My full name is Jon Brooks Miles. I have a twin brother. I had a twin brother. He's deceased now. But the name Jon was named after my mother's father, and Brooks was named after my father's mother's maiden name. The Jon is Jon, and my grandfather was John, and that was my mother's father. Well, as I've been told over the years, that what had happened, that my father and my mother's father did not get along. So when it came time to naming the twins, my brother was named Chandler after my father, and my mother insisted that I be named after her father, John. So a compromise was reached, so they spelled my name Jon. And the only time my father ever called me John was when he was upset at me or something, or somebody would call me on the telephone. He'd say, "John, telephone," but everybody else called me John, and he called, so the family name, they called me JB, my initials, Jon Brooks. So that was the beginning. So I was born on January 6, 1941, Hackensack, New Jersey. Lived there for about 6 months, and then we moved to Teaneck, New Jersey, where it's basically where I grew up at. Being that I love the outdoors so much, that I joined the Boy Scouts. And that was, you can look back on it, it was kind of like a little military type organization, but within it you learn discipline, which really helped me on until, when I got drafted into the Army. I mean, I knew how to march, I knew all that stuff, where most kids that went into basic training, they had to learn all this stuff, And my parents trusted us, or at least me. I was the one that wandered to just be home by dinner time, They didn't know where I went or what I did, and I just explored and really got around, as a youngster. Moved out here, so I we lived on Eastland Street for a while, and my father and brother took classes on running a service station, and the place they opened it in early 1961. And then I got a notice from Phoenix to go up and take a physical. So I went up there and I took the physical, and I thought I might be too tall for the Army because they had a limit, like 6'5" in height, and then I don't know what it was for the minimum, but as it turned out, I felt I was 6'6", and they measured me, and no, I was 6'5".
Maybe they fudged the results a little bit?
Well, I think with the draft going on, they wanted cannon fodder,
Yeah.
So I took the physical, passed the physical, and months later I get this call. You have to report, I think it was 110 South Scott Avenue, Tucson, Arizona, for induction into the United States Army. Finally, we went to Dallas, Texas, and then from Dallas, they put us on a plane and sent us to, Alexandria, Virginia, Alexandria, Louisiana. And then from there, they put us on a bus down to Fort Polk, Louisiana. So that's where I did my basic combat training in Louisiana. And I was gung-ho, I wasn't going to run to Canada or go to jail to avoid the draft. I was gung-ho. I went, so they made me into a platoon sergeant, to a sergeant or a squad leader.
Knowing Jon for most of my life, I was surprised to learn that he was gung-ho for fighting in Vietnam. But I also sensed he was nervous about the prospects of going to war.
When we got to Vietnam, So then we put clips in our rifles for the first time. I thought, wow. And then they loaded us. So then it was real, man. They loaded us in the back of a pickup or 2 deuce-and-a-half truck. The next day they loaded us up and took us to a staging area. So then at nighttime you could hear boom, boom off in the distance, all these rounds going off. Not rounds, but bombs and artillery. So we dug foxholes, and it would rain. You know, it's not very nice digging foxholes above, but the soil was all red, real red soil, you know. But have you, so finally they came and asked for some volunteers that to go from the staging area, go to the area that was going to be our fire base. So naturally, you know, I volunteered, you know. I mean, I was all ready, you know. I was gung-ho, you know. I was going to be G.I. Joe, you know. So I volunteered, and a bunch of us went out there. So I got on guard duty, one of the first shifts on guard duty. So I had loaded for bear, you know. So wouldn't you know it, it's raining out, and everybody went there and bedded down. All of a sudden, incoming rounds. You could actually hear, you could hear the shooting in the tunnel area. You could hear it, and then you hear it cutting the air because with the rain, it made the sounds real close to the ground. Holy smokes. But that was my first day, not the first day in Vietnam, but the first day in what was going to become our fire base. The first time I got shot at or had bullets whizzing over the air by somebody who wanted to kill me. Because in training, you get that infiltration courses, you get that to where you can hear it and you live through it. But this was the real deal, you know. Once in a while, we fired the howitzers, you know, they'd be what they called H&I, harassment and interdiction, where you know, they knew where the enemy was, so you'd fire rounds out there just to harass them, or if they were moving around to interdict them, whatever they were doing. So it wasn't like really coming in any personal contact. And one thing that happened too that gave me a lot of second thoughts about what the hell we were doing over there in Vietnam. We had 2 guns going out, and I was in the first gun, and all of a sudden we got what they call a hip shoot, where, you know, they need our help, so you just pull off the side of the road and you set up your gun, and you gotta lay the gun. You gotta put out your stakes out there because you have to zero in on everything. And we pulled it right. The only place to go was this big agricultural field where they're growing all kinds of crops there. You know, like basically, you know, what would you call like a truck farm crops? They had tomatoes and all this kind of. This truck just drove right in this field, and they had to drive in and go around because you had to position the gun whichever direction, you know, that the forward observers wanted it. So we went in there, and there was a lot of people out there in the fields, the workers, the Vietnamese. They were not happy about it at all. So I had a crew of guys. My job, I wasn't going to be manning the gun, but my job was with these 3 other guys to go round up all the people, the women, the kids, the old men, round them all up and get them away from there and make sure they had no weapons, you know, and then just keep them secure. So which we did, and they were not happy at all. And so we kept them, and it's funny, you know, that they have a lot of oxen, water buffalo, and what they do with the manure, the crap, you know, they pile it up in big piles because they use it for fertilizer later on. So we took them over. There's one area because it's a cleared area. We took them over to that, and just weren't pointing rifles at them. Just they saw they weren't going to do anything. So then we had like a guy, we called him Kit Carson. I guess every outfit had a Kit Carson. I guess assumed because the name wasn't unique to our guy, but he was a Vietnamese that spoke a little bit of English. So he came over and he talked to the head old man, and they really have a respectful hierarchy over there. You know, the younger people really respect the older people. So this old man, they called him Papa San. So this Kit Carson comes over, and he starts talking to this guy, and the guy back talks. So Vietnamese, they're pretty good with their feet, you know, so they start kicking this guy in the face, knocking him down and kicking him. So I just stepped right in there, hey, quit this crap, you know. So the Vietnamese, Kit Carson says, why? I said, you know, we're supposed to be guarding these people. You're going to piss them off even more. If somebody's out there in the jungle watching this stuff that's going on, they're going to be shooting us, man. You just get the hell out of here, you know. So I ran him off, you know. I mean, I was really, and he was cursing at me, I guess, in Vietnamese, and he left like he was going to tell the lieutenant. I said, tell him, you're jeopardizing me and these 3 other guys' lives too, you know. So he took off. So I carried in my pocket, I had this book, English Vietnamese. So, I mean, I could see kind of a change in their temperament, these people we were held prisoner. So then I got out my book and I, you know, Chow Ong, you know, and tried to talk, and he didn't really say anything. So then I went to the woman, Chow Ba, and then she said Chow Ong back to me and trying to talk and say a few words. So I never really, but, you know, I tried to be relational in a way, because I knew, you know, I'm looking out for us, you know, because somebody could be out there in the edge of the village or in the jungle somewhere, and they could be shooting at you, take a pot shot at you, you know. So after a while, we fired, I don't know how many rounds were fired. So after a while, the lieutenant comes back, you know, with the Kit Carson. I figured, okay, I'm going to hear it from this guy, you know. He came back, and so right away, the Kit Carson starts talking to Papa San, and the lieutenant had a stack of piastres, and piastres was like Vietnamese money. They call them, you know, yeah, I guess piastres. So he had a stack of brand new piastres, and I don't know what nomination they were, what number, how much it was, but the translation was, I heard the lieutenant say, well, no, we're sorry for damaging your field, and we want to, you know, pay you for your losses and blah, blah, blah. So the old man, so he gave the money to the old man, and it was like in one big stack, like about like that thick, and the old man just took it and threw it right back in the lieutenant's face. I laughed, you know. I kind of laughed. So then they left. So then we had to wait. Still had to keep an eye on him till the lieutenant and the Kit Carson left. And then when they got the gun back hooked up again and got back on the road, we left. And as I left, I looked at the old man, and he kind of gave me a nod like that. So I felt, oh, all right, you know. So that really got me to thinking, you know. I mean, how are these people, we're going over there and we're being like animals, you know. And we were, you know, on payday. We got paid once a month, and we didn't get paid in American dollars. We got paid in military payment certificates. We called them script, you know. So we got paid. So there were a lot of bars, these whorehouses and all that stuff. So, you know, like if we got paid in the afternoon, I mean, there was a curfew too. We had to be in by dark usually, no later than 7:30. So guys would go out there and just get crazy and tear up some of these places. One thing, there was one thing where there was this house of ill repute, and these guys, you know, I went with them. We went out there in this truck, and they were closed because it was getting later in the day, you know. So these guys had been drinking, and unfortunately it was all, well, I shouldn't say it, but the guys, and they started just carrying on, just tearing the place apart, started, you know, propositioning any woman they saw, you know, for sex or whatever, you know, and it was just really an embarrassment. We'd go by this little area where people are waiting for a bus, and they all squat down, and these guys going around there offering them $10 for this or that, you know.
$5 is all my mom allows me to spend. Okay, $10 each. What do we get for $10? Everything you want. Everything? Everything.
You keep playing.
Well, old buddy.
Playing.
Feel like spending some of your hard-earned money?
And you keep thinking that...
This pretty much disgusted me, you know. that what was going on, you know. So, and stuff like that, I'm sure happened a lot, you know. The one friend that I lost, he was a Ford observer. He was a lieutenant. And God, it's so sad, you know. He was a good guy. He was with us in the States. And what happened, you know, he was an ROTC, and then he got all his training, and he didn't like hanging out with officers. So at evenings, we'd go downtown to the bars downtown, and we had a bar. It was called the Vapors Lounge there in Lawton, Oklahoma. And that was kind of like our bar, you know, 2nd Battalion, 13th Artillery, A Battery. We had a big thing up on the wall. So he would come down there and drink beer with us, you know. And he was a regular guy, and his name was Boyle. Last name was Boyle, Lieutenant Boyle. Like, he was from Massachusetts. And he was a good guy. Well, you know, he was a Ford observer. He was one of these guys. And I went out with him one time when we went out with the infantry, you know, and saw how he operated with all his slide rule type stuff and calling in coordinates and shooting. And I mean, sharp as a tackle. He was up in one of these little bubble helicopters, you know, that could see the Iroquois helicopter, I think they were called, and guiding, you know, artillery rounds in. And the Iroquois helicopter got shot down. But the thing that made it so tragic, he was supposed to get out like in January, and then he was getting married in May, I think. So he decided to extend for 3 months because he could use the extra money for when he got married. So what happens, he gets shot down. And I told him, you know, you're stupid, man. You got to get out of here when you can. I need the money. I said, you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, you've seen it firsthand from that helicopter all the time. So we tried to talk to him. And I have a photo that was taken. I think there's 4 people in the photo, and 3 of them got killed there in that photo. And I used to think, I mean, was I bad luck? I took this photo, you know, of course, before they were killed. But I had that photo, and I think one of them was Lieutenant Boyle, the other was Sergeant Bauer, and the other one was Sergeant Soto. You know, I went over with no politics at all. I mean, I was kind of gung-ho in a way, because I think everybody, you always have this thing in the side you want to be in combat, you know, until it actually happens. So then you figure, okay, you know, I've had enough, I'm out of here, you know, because I think, I mean, that's just the feeling that I had. But then when I saw all the things, the way we treated people, there were other things where we'd have to go there and pull a little security when they were going to burn this hamlet down. They'd go in there and we'd be off like in the sides. They'd be in there with these flamethrowers burning down these thatched huts. They'd be killing chickens and pigs and stuff like that belonged to the people. And they have right near these villages and hamlets, they have like their cemetery where they have all these buildings or these statue things, and guys would desecrate those, try to throw grenades at them, try to blow them up. And I said, damn, and the people are crying and carrying on. I said, is this how we're going to win the war here? These are civilians, but supposedly they were warned because there was, you know, mortar rounds coming out every night and rifle fire. And if this didn't end, we were going to do this. And they'd gotten all these warnings, and I didn't want to be a part of that. That was being the ugly American. And there were things that I found out afterwards that really frosted me too, long afterwards, that I became more involved. But when I got out, I was kind of troubled. One of the tests was, you know, they give you photos and you're supposed to write an essay on these photos. Or one of them was a photo of this ROTC guy on campus that he was doing something, or his wife was pinning an award on him. He was in uniform and all that stuff. So I figured, well, I'm going to write this. I'm going to write that, you know, he received some award for bravery. And then I started going into the whole rant, basically. And all of a sudden I realized, you know, I'm against this damn war. I've been against it, all this crap that I've seen going on, that I'm against this. And I wrote this.
How interesting that Jon didn't know he was against the war until he wrote an essay for a college exam. Such is the writing process, as many therapists have people write down their thoughts and feelings so that they can process them.
But that story with Chavez was on. I was on security, went to Phoenix, the old Adams Hotel in Phoenix, and that was, I was basically on security, and I was just heck like a cowboy almost. I had Levi or Wrangler pants on, a Levi jacket, and I even had a cowboy hat, and things like, because you had to stand out in a way so other people on security knew who you were. So I was in this hotel. They had these big tables with all these, white tablecloths and dishes and all these big donors. These big rich people were there. So I was basically in the room, kind of off in the background as basically security, because we were at basic war with the Teamsters, and there'd been threats on Chavez's life. But anyway, when it came time for the seating arrangements, I wasn't really planning on eating. I would probably eat later, So the next thing I know, this guy, Ibarra, I forget his first name, but I always wanted to call him Richard, but it wasn't Richard, but it was Michael Ibarra. He was head of, and I could be wrong, so usually I remember things, but for some reason because I know so many Ibarra families. But anyway, he told me, he called me, "Hey Miles, come here." So I went over, he says, you're gonna eat at this table. I said, "Well, that's Chavez's table." "Yeah, you're gonna be here." And what Chavez did, he didn't want all these stuffed shirts sitting there at his table when he's eating. He got some kitchen help, he got some waitresses, he wanted working people there, and Ibarra thought I looked like a working people. Of course, I had to do away with my hat, so hell, I was sitting, there was like these tables, I don't know if there were 10 people at the big tables, round tables. So I got to sit at the same table and have dinner, nice fine meal, and some person next to me didn't want to eat all their food. Well, hell, I ate anything I could eat, But that was kind of a highlight, So anyway, but that made an impression on me in a way that, that he wanted to have this image. He was a leader of working type people, not these rich bankers and people who got money that donate. They needed the donations, of course, and the religion. He had a priest there too. Some guy with his collar was at our table too.
Okay, and you have a story about how the FBI conducted surveillance on the organization you worked for?
Right.
So can you tell me about that from the beginning?
The organization was the Tucson Committee for Human Rights in Latin America. And basically it was started by a bunch of Chileans, refugees that came to the United States after Pinochet took power in Chile. So the committee was put together to follow human rights abuses, mainly in Chile. But then as time, a couple of years went on, there was a lot going on in Central America, in El Salvador, Nicaragua. And in Nicaragua, the Sandinistas overthrew the Sandino government, and the National Guard basically kicked them out. So what happened after that was that the United States was funding the so-called freedom fighters. And it was with U.S. funds, taxpayer funds, and there was an amendment by a congressman named Bolin. It was called the Bolin Amendment, and it forbid the United States to support a counter-revolutionary or Contra group that was trying to overthrow another government. So then what happened that the Contras, who are the opposition, former, Somoza National Guardsmen who had it made, who caused all the trouble in Nicaragua. They wanted to get back in power. So the CIA had to come up with a plan of how we're going to fund them. So, so that's when our committee pretty much got involved with exposing what was going on and what the FBI was doing, and it ruffled a lot of feathers to the point where the FBI, started an investigation. And also, not only Nicaragua, but it was El Salvador. Like, our committee was a member of a group called CISPES, which is a committee in solidarity with the people of El Salvador who were fighting oppression by the Salvadoran oligarch who was supported by the United States government. So between, being a member of CISPES and bringing attention to the people in the Tucson area about what really is going on in El Salvador and with the Contras in Nicaragua, it's at that time they figure, well, how are we going to stop these groups from getting the truth out? So the FBI got involved. So they investigated us. They were trying to find out, or trying to say that we were violating the law in what we were doing. And our position was, no, we're basically concerned citizens that are not violating any laws. We have the First Amendment to the Constitution, and we're just, we don't agree with U.S. policy. So because Ronald Reagan was president at that time too, and he was really a right-wing, president, and he supported the Contras. To the fact that he called them freedom fighters, which was absurd. So what we had found out to our contacts here, that the CIA was operating with a front organization called Evergreen Aviation. Evergreen Aviation was taking, weapons and et cetera down to Nicaragua, and in exchange getting drugs and bringing them back to the United States. We had exposed Evergreen Aviation, and a lot of the mainstream press kind of laughed at it until an Evergreen Aviation plane was shot down over Nicaragua by the Sandinistas. So, they captured a guy named Eugene Hasselfoss, an American that was working for Air America. They found all the armaments and stuff that were being sent down to Nicaragua. So,
in 1986, Wisconsin native Eugene Hasselfoss made headlines. The plane he was in was shot out of the sky over Nicaragua by the Sandinistas. His capture and imprisonment blew the lid off the Iran-Contra affair. The scandal threatened the presidency of Ronald Reagan and made Hasselfoss a national figure.
So basically, the thing was that drugs were coming back to the United States, and they could be sold on the whatever market it is, a black market or whatever, and the money that was raised could buy weapons and whatever the Contras needed, because legally they weren't allowed to send supplies, to the Contras who were trying to overthrow the Sandinistas. So,
October 5th, 1986. A plane crashes in the Nicaraguan jungle. Killed with a pilot, William Cooper, co-pilot, Wallace Sawyer, and a Contra radio man. Eugene Hasselfoss survived.
I went back, found my parachute, I cut it all up. I made a hammock out of it and a tent over the top because it was just raining out all the time. And then the rest of it I just used to keep the dampness and the mosquitoes and the other bugs off of me. But basically, I knew where I was, but I just happened to run headlong right into the Sandinistas that were there.
My name is Gene Hasselfoss.
Where you're from?
From Marinette, Wisconsin.
Can you tell us how you came to be here?
I was shot out of the sky.
He crashed on Sunday at approximately noon. So basically I found out the same way everybody else did, from the press.
A Wisconsin man has been the focus of international news this week. 45-year-old Eugene Hasselfoss of Marinette was captured in Nicaragua after his cargo plane was shot down. At a press conference Thursday, Hasselfoss said his mission was directed by the CIA, but U.S. officials say the flights were privately directed. Mrs. Sally Hasselfoss joined her husband in Nicaragua this week. Hasselfoss has been jailed and may stand trial.
So, we had exposed all of this stuff, so it really, we didn't realize at the time how effective we were. But this was back in the early 80s. Well, it was like 83, 84. We had demonstrations out at Penalia Park where Evergreen Aviation was. And, we just kept the pressure up. And it wasn't until we didn't know at the time we were under investigation by the FBI until a year or so later when they started making phone calls. And there were 3 of us in the leadership of the organization, and they tried to contact, 2 of them worked for the university, and then there was me who worked for myself. So they tried initially the same pattern. They called Barbara Kingsolver's employer and said, "Does Barbara Kingsolver work for you?" They identified themselves as the FBI. And right away, that's intimidating to especially an employee when your boss knows the FBI is asking questions about it. The same thing happened with Joe Hoffman, working for the University of Arizona. The exact same thing. Well, they got frustrated with me because they couldn't find out who I worked for. So the FBI went around asking people in the progressive community, who's Jon Miles worked for? So finally they got the word that I worked for myself. Well, lo and behold, I got a phone call from them, and I refused to talk with them. But they were saying they just wanted information about our group, how we got funding and blah, blah, blah. So I refused to talk with them. I told them it was none of their business and basically hung up. That was basically the approach that we took. So our committee finally decided that what we would do, being that we had nothing to hide, we would send a statement of our purpose and a couple of copies of our newsletters to the FBI and tell them that's all we would give them, that we weren't a 501c3. We did not have to disclose our funding sources, our mailing list, etc. So things kind of quieted down after that. Barb said that she and Joe were living together, that their phone had been tapped. I don't know whether mine was or not. I know I was pretty outspoken in the community and I had gotten death threats over the telephone, etc., etc. So the year goes to 1989 when I get a phone call from ABC Evening News, Peter Jennings, ABC Evening News, and mentioned they had a news team in town that was covering the U of A Wildcat basketball team that was #1 in the nation, and they wanted to come and talk to me because of some information that the Center for Constitutional Rights had just gotten through the Freedom of Information Act about the FBI's illegal surveillance of groups that were opposed to U.S. policy in Central America. Well, they mentioned that there were 2 documents that had my name on it. One was, in fact, that the FBI had investigated the committee, and the local FBI agent sent a report to Phoenix to his main office saying that we weren't violating any laws, et cetera, et cetera. Well, then the FBI fired back to him that that's not good enough. We want a spin-off investigation. So we found out after that a spin-off investigation would be somebody could join the organization and try to find out what was going on. In other meetings, we kept real good records of who attended the meetings, et cetera, and we had 3 new people who joined the committee at that time, say 1983, and a couple of them were beyond reproach, but the third was kind of questionable and still is to this day. we never accused him, but we were very careful with what we said and did around him, and it's pretty obvious he wanted our mailing list. He wanted to get on the newsletter committee and financial committees, which is what the FBI was after. So we basically never got him any information. So those were basically in the two documents that they had. So the ABC Evening News came to interview me at the house, and I basically told them the story. They asked me if there was any footage of the demonstration that any news team covered up at Pinal Air Park, where Evergreen Aviation was based out of. I told them yes, there was, and their local ABC affiliate happened to have old news clippings of when we went out there. So they said it was Peter Jennings was doing a series on his evening news every night. They said it would be on in the next couple of weeks. Well, we watched at home for quite a while. And, it was right at dinner time. Nothing happened. We just kind of gave up. And then one night at dinner, phone rings and I answered. It's one of my Army buddies. I was living up in San Francisco. And he said, "Hey, Miles, you're still a troublemaker." And I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, I was just watching the news and they interviewed you, on the news about the FBI and the CIA, and you said some pretty strong words." And I said, "Oh, great." Then I started getting friends in Tucson that had seen it, that had seen the footage and recognized other people in the footage. So it got some coverage. But by that time, the FBI wasn't bothering me anymore, or us for that matter. And then, the phone calls that one of the guys that was threatening me wound up getting in trouble in another way and got probation. So he backed off, and he was part of a group called the CMA, or what is it, the Soldier of Fortune people, but they were raising funds and supplies for the Contras. So, but they kind of backed off, but they had an active chapter here in Tucson. So they really backed off after all this happened. So that's pretty much the story in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm. And then there were, I remember a couple men in suits at some sort of function. And I was talking to them, and you called me over to you and you told me not to talk to them. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, there were two guys, with Arthur Gill and Sam Sharp. They were right-wing zealots who supported the CMA, which is Civilian Military Assistance. And they would come to various events and tape record, and they were giving information to the FBI, which later on, when Arthur Gill was subpoenaed, or was called to give a deposition in a court hearing, pre-court hearing, about accusing some state, or accusing some people of being communist, and he was sued for defamation of character. Well, a lot of this information came out in this deposition, and Bill Reisner took the deposition and gave me a copy of the deposition, and Sam Sharp and Arthur Gill, who did the deposition, were basically getting this information and giving it to the FBI, but I have no idea what the FBI did with that information.
And about what year was this?
Oh, this would have been in the 80s, the early 80s. And one thing in reading that deposition, a lot of this information that Arthur Gill had gathered up, probably 90% of it was wrong. He was accusing people of being communists or friends of communists who were not, When there were communists involved in some of these meetings, he didn't get their names. I mean, it's pretty sad, what they did. After a while, they could come to a public meeting place, like at Northwest Neighborhood Center or El Rio, and they could tape it. We'd make life pretty miserable for them, and then we started having meetings at private places or churches where we could kick them out, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how we affected them. But when we participated in the peace fair, they would come by and take pictures of all the peace groups and saying all the peace groups were a bunch of commies and communist supporters, you know. They were just really, you know, out in right field someplace. They were kind of, you know, what do we call them? Right-wing fanatics, thinking like there's a communist behind every bush.
Mm-hmm.
When in fact there wasn't, you know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, you bet.
Do you have any last words?
No, I did go on like some radio programs, and I did make some heavy accusations about the FBI and the CIA. And I remember one that I said, and I don't know if they put it on the TV or not because they didn't see the TV thing. They said, "What's the solution?" And I said, "Well, initially they should stop the surveillance of people that are concerned citizens who just don't agree with the president and the president's policy." And I said, furthermore, I said, they're like a cancer. And when you have a cancer, you have to remove the tumor. You have to get rid of those organizations and reorganize them, you know. So
I bet they didn't like that.
yeah, probably. So I don't know what got on ABC Evening News. I know this radio station, it was a local KXCI radio station.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I think, live on the air. So it got on there. So that was kind of a hardcore position, you know, to just consider them a cancer and you had to eliminate the tumor, you know.
Right.
And as far as, you know, that award, that was kind of like, I don't know, it was kind of a joke. Like when Dan Ekstrom does all these events through LULAC, which is, you know, a Latin American support organization. He does these dinners and stuff and people buy tickets. And I thought I was going to get an award myself. And I thought it was kind of ironic that the FBI was investigating me and then they were going to give me an award for what, you know. So I thought I had a speech lined up to talk about that line, but it turned out there was like 100 people were getting this little award. You know, it was kind of just a joke. And it had the woman who was in charge of the FBI here and the main FBI director, the woman from Phoenix. They presented this award. So when I went up to get the award, of course I wasn't allowed to say anything, but look, I said, I would like a picture with each one of you around me. So they took the picture. I said, I'd like a copy, which I never got, but they gave me this certificate and this little lapel pin, you know, from just saying the Department of Justice, DOJ. So it was kind of a joke. Over the years, then in 2006, there was a congressman named Sensenbrenner from Wisconsin, and he was pushing legislation to start getting these what do you call them, these camps to round up illegal people. What he called them, we said we don't like the word illegal, but he said illegal people, and put them in these detention camps and then deport them. So there was a radio guy in LA started talking about having a nationwide rally against this, you know, and asking all undocumented people, everybody to hit the streets and, you know, and rally against this. Well, then when a rally was called by other human rights groups, there were a few others sprung up after us, about having a big event for April 10th, which was the call nationwide. So we participated in that, so we said yes. So I basically took over the peacekeeping et cetera, that was going to go on there, because we had word that there was these couple of guys that used to go around trying to intimidate, and they would burn Mexican flags and try to cause riots. So we had to be ready for that. So I had a lot of people working for me. I had people who had to stay at the park where the rally was, and then because this is where the guy had threatened to burn another Mexican flag, and then we had the big march that started at St. John's Church down in Ajo and 12th. And when we were convening that rally, I mean, I was freaked out, you know. There's so many people. I mean, I couldn't believe it. And it's really, I have a photo that I'll have to show you that, I was refusing to have a cell phone. I didn't want any of this stuff. So the cops were kind of upset because they wanted to be in touch with me all the time, you know. So I somebody loaned me their cell phone, you know, to use. So somebody caught me with a picture with me, you know, there, and I had my vest on, and then there I'm on the cell phone, and they're blackmailing me. Hey, Miles is using a cell phone, you know. And it was actually pretty worthless because you can't really hear when the cops would call you or something. But so the cops realized there were tens of thousands of people there, that the route that we had, we had like just part of the road. So they said they were gonna close the road completely for us, everything, both ways. So the route was going to be, about maybe 2.5 miles, the route. So, and we had to be wary of some of the anarchists the anarchists wanted to block some major intersections that we had to pass through, and the cops were working with us saying that they were going to block the intersections so we could get through. But as soon as we got through, that, you know, they'd let traffic resume. Well, what the anarchists wanted to do, they wanted to stop everybody at the intersection and have a big jam, a people jam there, so traffic would be shut all over. So, you know, we didn't want that, because again, you know, we had a message we wanted to get out publicly, and we didn't want the news to just pick up on blocking traffic. So we knew that in the anarchists, there weren't very many of them. You know, they dressed in black and they were wearing these bandanas, and you know, they're pretty obvious, but there's maybe 10 or 12 of them. So what it was, I had my people staged, and I had good people. I had trainings for them. So I had about maybe 10 of my people at that intersection for to wait there while we came through, to in case they tried to stop, just to keep everybody moving. So they did. So I managed to get back there by the time the anarchists got there, because somebody called me. So I had somebody else leading the march. Kat Rodriguez was like up in the front, and she was good leading the march. So I got back, and of course the anarchists wanted to stop, you know, and block traffic. We just kept people going. We almost walked right over them. So they had no choice. We had a mass of people just move them down the road. Of course, this guy, Roy Warden, and his small army of haters, and basically racist haters, were there at the park. And they had a little area, and the cops had surrounded them to kind of protect them. So I had my people, and we all had these orange vests, safety vests. So I had all of my people surround the cops.
Also trying to keep the peace, a group of volunteers from the other side who formed their own circle around police and urged troublemakers to stay away.
There's nothing to see here. Ignore the ignorant. Ignore them.
But with emotions running so high on both sides, for some, that was impossible.
What happened in the park, I had my hands full. Man, we had so many people. That whole Armory Park, it's not called Armory Park, it's Military something park, but it's at the Armory Park Senior Center. There were so many people you couldn't keep track. And meanwhile, the cops let me know that they had all these squads around, and motorcycle squads and helicopters and riot police in case anything happened. So with my group, I had Lorena Howard. She was like a big woman, and she's well-known, strong voice, that she was really keeping the people away from Roy Warden, because he was threatening to burn the flag, but he didn't. So finally it came time he was going to burn the flag, and the youngsters, the high school kids, everybody's around. So he gets his buddies there, and he's got a stick, and he puts the Mexican flag, and he's got a loudspeaker in his advertising. You're going to go back to Mexico. He's talking all this racist crap, and he's going to burn the Mexican flag. So, all hell was going to break loose. And meanwhile, our rally was going on at the park. We had speakers, we had mariachis, we had all kinds of good stuff going on. But all the young people wanted to be where this troublemaker was. So when he threatened to burn the flag, we had thousands and thousands of people coming around. He got his buddy, Russell Dove, put the flag on a stick, and then they got charcoal lighter fluid and soaked the flag in charcoal lighter, and then they got one of those little starters and the flag started burning. So a lot of the kids, we had water bottles. So the kids took the caps off and were throwing water at the flag. Well, supposedly, and I didn't see it, supposedly one of the cops got hit by a full water bottle. So then the cops went and they grabbed this girl, a young woman, and they took her. Instead of taking her out of the park, which was one street, there was a street nearby. These guys are right on the shuffleboard court right next to the sidewalk on the street. Instead of taking her there, these cops marched her diagonally across the park with all these kids running after. And meanwhile, motorcycle cops come in and riot police on the streets. They were convened like a block west of where we were on the other side of the children's library that's down there, across from Armory Park, across from the big park. So they went. So I was trying to get our people to stay back. So meanwhile, they're spraying. There's a helicopter going over, chop, 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 chop. And then you got all the motorcycles coming in. Then you got all the screaming and yelling. And the kids are taking these girls, and some guys are coming to try to pull the young woman away from the cops, and they take him, and all these cops come in, and then they get down to an area where they had all these guys with their shields. And they got these people they arrested behind those shields, and then we were outside that.
At one point, News 4's cameras caught a scuffle on tape. We do know that 6 people were arrested and a Tucson police officer was injured. We also know Tucson police used pepper spray gas to control the crowd. One of our own photographers caught in the crossfire had to be treated at a local hospital. Scuffle happened right after a group against illegal immigration burned 2 Mexican flags during that rally.
I think that, make a long story short, that the cops are the ones that provoked the riot. Even though Roy Warden and his haters burned the flag, that got it going. But when the cops, just took the 2 of them, grabbed that young woman, she was, I think, a high school kid, grabbed her and took her. That's when the proverbial blank hit the fan, I wanted to just back up a little bit, that as it turned out that this lung cancer that I had, it was as a result of exposure to Agent Orange when I was in South Vietnam. So I applied, as soon as I found out I had this cancer, I applied, for disability benefits from the VA. I did that like in October of 2016, and they classified me as 100% disabled. I was already getting disability from the VA. So that made life a lot easier, because all the extra, not only financial benefits, but all the other benefits that come along with it. When they found all this stuff, they put me on this immunotherapy. It was called Erlotinib, which is a chemo drug that attacks the cancer cell. It's not like other chemo drugs that attack all cells, It's worked. The cancer hadn't spread anything. They've done MRIs in my brain and found no signs of cancer there. They do this PET scan once every 4 months and no other indication of cancer. So it's worked. So I'm part of this immunotherapy, one of these miracle drugs they have. And just alluding to what I said when I initially started this segment was, it's through the VA, just to give a credit to the VA, that, I don't know what I would be doing if I was getting civilian health care, but it's top of the line stuff, and I can only imagine the expense that this chemo medicine, would cost in the civilian or private sector. So I really have to say I'm grateful to the Veterans Healthcare Administration and the Veterans Benefit Administration too. And that's why even to this day there's an attempt in Congress to privatize the VA healthcare system as well as Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So there's a big fight going on. So I'm part of that fight to save the VA. I have a bumper sticker on the back of my truck that says "Save the VA," and we have demonstrations and public meetings on saving the VA, working with the unions and with other people who are involved, especially people who are receiving Medicare and Social Security, because it is an attack by the right wing on any social type benefits that we're getting. And we want the VA to continue as it is, being fully funded by Congress, not partially funded like they're doing now, which is why there is problems in the VA, but it's because they're not properly funded.
Thank you for watching this abridged version of the video about Jon Miles' life. To see the entire 9-episode documentary, there's a link to the YouTube playlist in the description below. Feel free to make any positive comments in the comment section. I'm Ramon Bannister with Giraffe Video Production. Have a nice rest of your day.